What happens when a calm, intellectual Hollywood star known for playing brilliant minds suddenly walks onto one of the most politically charged talk shows in America? And within minutes, the atmosphere turns from polite conversation into something that feels dangerously close to a televised showdown. The studio lights glow brightly across the iconic stage of The View. The audience murmurs with excitement, phones ready, whispers bouncing from seat to seat. A guest like Benedict Cumberbatch doesn't appear here every day. Known around the world for his razor-sharp intelligence, intense performances, and his unforgettable role as the mysterious genius in Sherlock, Benedict carries a reputation: calm, articulate, and nearly impossible to rattle. But today, something feels different. Before we dive into this moment that stunned the studio and sent shockwaves across social media, take 1 second to help this channel grow. If you enjoy dramatic celebrity stories like this, make sure you subscribe to The Truth Narrator, hit that like button, and drop a comment below. Your support helps bring more unbelievable stories like this straight to you. Now back to the moment that nobody in that studio would forget. The cameras roll as the hosts of The View greet the audience with their usual energy. Sitting at the table today are several familiar faces, including the sharp and outspoken Sunny Hostin. Known for her legal background and fearless commentary, Sunny rarely backs down from a heated debate. As the introduction begins, the crowd erupts into applause. And joining us today, one host announces with a bright smile, the incredibly talented actor, star of countless blockbuster films. Please welcome Benedict Cumberbatch. The curtain parts. Benedict walks onto the stage wearing a tailored navy suit, his signature calm expression resting somewhere between polite smile and quiet curiosity. He waves gently to the crowd, acknowledging their cheers as he takes his seat. At first, everything seems completely normal. The hosts congratulate him on his recent projects. Clips from his films flash across the large studio screens. The audience laughs and applauds as stories about filming mishaps and on-set adventures unfold. Sunny leans forward slightly, smiling politely. "So Benedict," she begins, "you've played some of the smartest characters in film and television. Sherlock Holmes, brilliant scientists, powerful leaders. Do you ever feel pressure, knowing people see you as this symbol of intelligence?" Benedict chuckles softly. "Well, that's quite the responsibility," he says with a light British tone. "But I think the key is remembering that acting is about exploring human flaws as much as intelligence." The audience nods approvingly. For several minutes, the conversation flows easily. Benedict discusses creativity, storytelling, and the importance of curiosity. His answers are thoughtful, measured, and charming. But then the tone shifts. Sunny adjusts slightly in her chair, her expression becoming more serious. "Benedict," she says slowly, "you've been very vocal in interviews about certain political and social issues. Some critics say celebrities shouldn't involve themselves in politics because they live in a completely different reality from ordinary people." The audience murmurs. Benedict tilts his head slightly, considering the question. "Well," he replies calmly, "I think everyone has a voice. Actors are citizens too. If you care about something deeply, I believe it's important to speak about it." Sunny nods, but the look in her eyes suggests she isn't finished. "But do you think," she continues, "that Hollywood sometimes speaks over everyday Americans instead of listening to them?" A few scattered claps echo through the audience. The air in the studio grows subtly heavier. Benedict pauses. Not long, but long enough for the tension to become noticeable. "I think," he finally says carefully, "that the danger is assuming any group of people speaks with one voice. Hollywood is full of different perspectives, just like any other industry." Sunny leans back slightly, her eyebrows raised. "So you don't think there's an elite bubble?" A ripple of nervous laughter moves through the crowd. Benedict smiles faintly, but his eyes sharpen. "Well, if there is," he says slowly, "I imagine it's much larger than just Hollywood." The audience reacts with a mixture of laughter and surprise. One of the other hosts quickly jumps in with a lighter question, attempting to smooth the moment over. But Sunny isn't finished yet. She leans forward again, folding her hands. "You know, Benedict," she says, her voice calm but probing, "some people watching right now might say it's easy for wealthy celebrities to talk about social responsibility when they've never struggled the way ordinary families have." A few audience members clap again. The studio cameras zoom slightly closer. Benedict's smile fades into a more thoughtful expression. "I understand that concern," he replies. "But compassion isn't measured by income. People can care about others regardless of their background." Sunny nods slowly. Yes, she says. But some critics say those conversations sometimes feel like lectures. Now the room grows noticeably quieter. Benedict shifts slightly in his chair. Well, he says, his voice still calm but now carrying a firmer tone. I'd hope people see it less as a lecture and more as a conversation. Sunny's lips curl into a subtle smile. But today, she replies, it is a conversation. The audience lets out an audible, oh. Benedict chuckles quietly. Then I suppose we're exactly where we should be. For a moment, the tension breaks with laughter. But underneath the smiles, something is building. The hosts exchange quick glances. Producers behind the cameras shift uneasily. And somewhere in the audience, someone whispers to a friend. This is about to get interesting. Sunny straightens her notes and looks directly at Benedict again. All right, she says. Let's talk honestly. The tone of her voice has changed. Completely. And let's see how honest this conversation really becomes. The audience falls into a sudden, electric silence. Because what started as a friendly celebrity interview is now beginning to feel like the opening move of a much bigger confrontation. And no one in that studio is quite prepared for what happens next. For a moment after Sunny's words, the studio feels strangely suspended in time. The applause fades. The laughter disappears. Even the bright studio lights suddenly feel harsher, as if they're exposing every micro-expression at the table. Across from her, Benedict Cumberbatch remains calm, but something in his posture subtly changes. His shoulders straighten slightly. His eyes narrow, just enough to show he understands exactly where this conversation might be heading. The hosts of The View glance at each other for a split second. The silent kind of exchange that happens when everyone senses the same thing. This interview just crossed an invisible line. Sunny taps her pen lightly against the table, her expression thoughtful but firm. Let's be real for a moment, says Sunny Hostin. You're one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. You've played powerful characters, brilliant thinkers, people who challenge systems. But many viewers feel celebrities speak passionately about issues, while living lives completely detached from everyday struggle. A ripple of murmurs runs through the audience. Some nod in agreement. Others shift uncomfortably. Benedict listens without interrupting, his fingers loosely interlocked on the table. Finally, he exhales softly. You know, he begins, I actually think that's a very fair concern. The audience reacts with slight surprise. Sunny raises an eyebrow. But, Benedict continues, I also think it's dangerous to assume someone's circumstances automatically erase their empathy. The tone remains calm, measured, but there is now a firmness behind every word. Sunny leans forward again. But empathy isn't the same as experience, she says. A few audience members clap again. Benedict nods slowly. That's true. For a brief moment, it seems like the conversation might remain respectful. But then Sunny asks the question that shifts everything. So let me ask you directly, she says. When celebrities speak out about political or social issues, do you believe they understand the consequences those policies have on people who are struggling financially? The room goes quiet again. One of the other hosts shifts in her seat. Behind the cameras, a producer whispers something into a headset. Benedict pauses. Not the kind of pause caused by confusion, but the kind that signals careful thought. Well, he says slowly, I think the more important question is whether anyone truly understands the full consequences of those decisions. Sunny tilts her head. That sounds like avoiding the question. A few audience members gasp softly. Benedict smiles faintly. Not avoiding, he says. Expanding. The audience reacts with scattered laughter. Sunny lets out a small chuckle. You're very good with words, she says. Occupational hazard, Benedict replies. But Sunny presses forward. Let me put it another way, she says. There are families watching right now who are working 2 jobs, struggling to pay rent, worried about groceries. And then they turn on the television and hear millionaires telling them how society should change. Now the tension is undeniable. Some audience members clap loudly. Others remain silent. Benedict listens carefully. Then he speaks. But isn't the real question whether those ideas are valid, not who says them? The audience murmurs again. Sunny folds her arms slightly. But credibility matters. Benedict nods. Yes, it does. He pauses. Then his voice becomes slightly more intense. But credibility also comes from honesty. And honesty sometimes means acknowledging that problems are bigger than any one group. The words land heavily in the room. Sunny studies him closely. You're suggesting critics focus too much on the messenger? I'm suggesting, Benedict says calmly, that dismissing ideas simply because they come from actors might be just as unhelpful as actors pretending they have all the answers. That line draws a loud reaction. Some applause. Some surprised laughter. Sunny smiles again, but this time it's sharper. So you admit celebrities don't have all the answers? Of course, Benedict says immediately. Then why speak so confidently about solutions? The tension spikes again. Benedict leans slightly closer to the table. Because silence doesn't solve problems either. The audience erupts with mixed reactions, applause from some, hesitant murmurs from others. Sunny raises a hand slightly, calming the room. You know, she says, some critics might say that sounds very noble, but also very convenient. Benedict's eyes narrow just slightly. Convenient? Sunny nods. Yes, because actors speak passionately about issues. But they don't actually have to live under the policies they advocate. That statement hits the studio like a spark in dry grass. The audience reacts loudly, gasps, whispers, shifting bodies. Even the other hosts look surprised by the directness. For the first time since the interview began, Benedict's expression changes completely. The polite smile disappears, not replaced by anger, but by something far more serious. He takes a slow breath. Well, he says quietly, I think that assumption may underestimate how connected people actually are. Sunny lifts her eyebrows. Explain. Benedict glances briefly toward the audience. You see, he says, society isn't divided into separate worlds the way people often imagine. Policies affect everyone eventually, just in different ways. Sunny listens carefully. But they don't affect everyone equally, she counters. Benedict nods again. That's true. Then he adds something that makes the entire room freeze. But the danger, he says slowly, is turning that inequality into a reason to silence voices instead of encouraging more discussion. The words echo through the studio. Sunny stares at him for a long moment. The audience is completely silent now. Even the cameras seem to move more carefully. Then Sunny leans back slightly and smiles. Oh, she says softly. So this is going to be one of those conversations. A wave of nervous laughter ripples across the audience. But everyone can feel it now. The temperature of the room has changed. What started as a celebrity interview has quietly transformed into something much deeper and much more unpredictable, because Sunny isn't backing down, and Benedict clearly isn't either. The stage is set, and the real confrontation has only just begun. The atmosphere inside the studio is no longer light or playful. Something heavier now hangs in the air, a quiet tension that every person in the room can feel. Across the table, Sunny Hostin studies her guest carefully, her expression calm but calculating. She has hosted thousands of conversations on The View, but this one has clearly taken on a life of its own. And sitting opposite her, Benedict Cumberbatch no longer looks like a relaxed celebrity promoting a film. He looks focused, measured, almost like someone preparing for a debate he never expected to have. The audience senses it too. Some lean forward in their seats. Others glance at the giant studio screens showing the close-up shots of both faces. The producers behind the cameras exchange uneasy looks. Sunny breaks the silence first. You know, Benedict, she says, folding her hands on the table. There's a reason people question celebrities speaking about social issues. Many viewers feel that Hollywood voices dominate conversations that should belong to everyday people. A few members of the audience clap in agreement. Benedict listens quietly. Sunny continues. Some would even say celebrities sometimes create narratives about problems without really understanding the people living those realities. Now the room grows very still. Benedict slowly inhales. You're right about one thing, he says carefully. People's lived experiences deserve respect. Sunny nods slightly. But, Benedict adds, his voice firming, that shouldn't mean the conversation becomes exclusive. Sunny tilts her head. Exclusive? Yes, Benedict replies. Because if we start deciding who is allowed to care about certain issues, we risk shrinking the conversation instead of expanding it. The audience murmurs. Sunny raises an eyebrow. But isn't it already unequal? She asks. When someone with massive influence speaks, their voice carries far more weight than the average person. Benedict nods slowly. That's true, he admits. Then he leans forward slightly. But influence can also be used to amplify voices that might otherwise be ignored. A few audience members clap. Sunny notices the reaction. But that assumes celebrities are always using that influence responsibly, she replies. Benedict's eyes narrow slightly, not in anger, but in concentration. No one uses influence perfectly, he says. Not actors, not journalists, not politicians. That line draws a noticeable reaction. Several audience members clap louder. Sunny smiles, though there's a sharp edge to it. Careful, she says. You're sitting at a table with journalists. The audience laughs. Benedict chuckles softly. Which is exactly why I said it. Even Sunny laughs at that. For a brief moment, the tension softens. But the calm doesn't last long. Sunny flips through the notes in front of her. Let me ask you something more personal, she says. Benedict nods. When you speak publicly about global issues, poverty, inequality, immigration, do you ever worry that people hear those words and think, easy for him to say? The question lands like a stone dropped into still water. Benedict pauses again, and this time the pause lasts longer. The cameras zoom in. The audience is silent. Finally he answers. Yes, he says quietly. The honesty surprises the room. Yes, I do think about that. Sunny seems intrigued now. Then why keep doing it? Benedict leans back slightly, considering the question. Because, he says slowly, if fear of criticism stops people from speaking about problems, those problems don't disappear. Sunny watches him carefully. But what if the criticism is valid? Benedict nods again. Then it should be heard. The audience murmurs again. Sunny leans forward. So you believe critics are right to question celebrities? Yes, Benedict replies calmly. But questioning someone's perspective, he adds, is different from dismissing their concern entirely. The audience reacts with a mixture of claps and thoughtful silence. Sunny studies him for a moment. You're very diplomatic, she says. Occupational survival, Benedict replies with a faint smile. The audience laughs again. But Sunny isn't done. Let's push this further, she says. Now the other hosts glance at her again. They know that tone. Sunny's voice becomes more direct. You've played powerful characters in films about justice, intelligence, and morality, she says. Characters who challenge systems. Benedict nods slightly. But in real life, she continues, systems are complicated. Policies have consequences. People disagree strongly about what solutions actually work. She leans closer. So when celebrities speak with certainty about those solutions, do you ever worry that influence might unintentionally oversimplify complex issues? Now the room becomes intensely quiet. Benedict folds his hands together. I think oversimplification happens everywhere, he says. Sunny waits. In politics, in media, on social media, even in entertainment. The audience murmurs again. Then Benedict adds something that shifts the tone yet again. But the real danger, he says, is pretending that complex issues shouldn't be discussed publicly at all. Sunny's eyes narrow slightly. And who said that? Benedict meets her gaze directly. Sometimes that's the implication when people say certain voices should stay silent. The tension spikes again. Several audience members gasp quietly. One of the other hosts shifts uncomfortably in her seat. Sunny slowly crosses her arms. So you believe critics are trying to silence celebrities? Benedict shakes his head. No, he says calmly. I believe critics are part of the conversation. The audience relaxes slightly. But Benedict isn't finished. However, he continues, a conversation only works when people assume good faith on both sides. Sunny leans back in her chair. And you think that hasn't happened today? The question is sharp. The audience holds its breath. Benedict pauses again. For a moment, it seems like he might dodge the question. But then he answers. I think, he says carefully, that today's conversation has been passionate and necessary. The room exhales collectively. Even Sunny smiles slightly. But then she asks one final question. A question that no one in the studio expected. All right, she says slowly. If you believe every voice deserves to be part of the conversation. She leans forward. Then let me ask you this. The cameras zoom closer again. The audience goes completely silent. What responsibility do celebrities have when millions of people are listening? Benedict's expression grows serious again. The tension returns instantly. Because everyone in that studio suddenly realizes something. This isn't just a celebrity interview anymore. It's a philosophical confrontation. And Benedict's next answer will determine how this entire moment is remembered. For a few seconds after the question is asked, the entire studio becomes so quiet that even the faint hum of the cameras can be heard. What responsibility do celebrities have when millions of people are listening? The words from Sonny Hostin hang in the air like a challenge. Every camera in the studio is now locked on Benedict Cumberbatch. The audience waits. The hosts wait. Even the production crew behind the bright lights seem frozen. Because everyone knows this is the moment that will define the entire conversation. Benedict slowly leans forward, resting his hands on the table. His expression is calm, but the seriousness in his eyes is unmistakable. I think, he begins carefully, that anyone with a platform carries responsibility. The audience remains silent. But that responsibility, he continues, is not just about speaking. Sonny watches him closely. It's also about listening. A few audience members nod. Benedict continues. When millions of people are listening to you, the worst thing you can do is assume you already have all the answers. The tension in the room shifts slightly. But the second worst thing, he adds, is deciding not to speak at all because you're afraid of criticism. A ripple of murmurs spreads through the audience. Sonny tilts her head thoughtfully. So you believe celebrities should speak out? I believe anyone who cares about something should speak out, Benedict replies. Sonny presses again. But what about the power imbalance? One tweet from a celebrity can reach millions. A single opinion can influence huge audiences. Benedict nods. That's true. Then he says something that causes the entire room to lean in. But influence isn't ownership of the conversation. The audience murmurs again. It's participation in it. Sonny raises an eyebrow. And you believe celebrities remember that? Benedict pauses. Some do. A few audience members laugh. Even Sonny smiles at that. But the moment quickly becomes serious again. Benedict continues. Look, the truth is, society often treats famous people like symbols. Either heroes or villains. But the reality is much simpler. He gestures lightly with one hand. We're just people. Imperfect people with opinions. Sonny nods slowly. But people with enormous reach. Yes, Benedict admits. And that means the responsibility isn't just on celebrities. Sonny's eyebrows lift. Explain. Benedict glances briefly toward the audience. The responsibility also belongs to the audience. Now the crowd murmurs loudly. When we hear someone speak, he continues, whether it's an actor, a journalist, or a politician, we shouldn't accept their words blindly. Sonny folds her hands again. So you're saying people should question everything. I'm saying people should think for themselves. That line lands powerfully. Several audience members clap loudly. Others exchange thoughtful looks. Sonny studies him for a moment. You know, she says slowly, some critics might say that answer sounds very reasonable, but also very careful. Benedict smiles slightly. Well, he says, we are on live television. The audience laughs again. The tension finally begins to ease. One of the other hosts jumps in with a lighter tone. Well, I think we can all agree this has been one of the most spirited interviews we've had in a while. The audience bursts into applause. Sonny chuckles. That's one way to describe it. But then she turns back to Benedict for one final remark. I'll say this, she says. You didn't dodge the tough questions. Benedict smiles politely. And you didn't avoid asking them. The audience applauds again. For a moment, it feels like the confrontation has resolved itself. But the real story is only beginning. Because within minutes of the segment ending, clips of the exchange begin exploding across the internet. Social media lights up. Headlines appear across entertainment websites. Benedict Cumberbatch faces tough questions on The View. Sonny Hostin challenges Hollywood activism. Unexpected debate breaks out on daytime TV. Fans begin arguing in comment sections. Some praise Benedict for staying calm and thoughtful under pressure. Others applaud Sonny for asking the questions many viewers have been wondering for years. Video clips rack up millions of views within hours. Debates erupt across platforms. Was Benedict right that every voice deserves to be part of the conversation? Or was Sonny right that influence comes with greater responsibility? Back in the studio, long after the cameras stop rolling, audience members are still talking about what they witnessed. Because it wasn't just a celebrity interview. It was a moment where two strong perspectives collided, respectfully but intensely, in front of millions of viewers. And moments like that are rare on television. Moments where nobody completely wins. Nobody completely loses. But everyone leaves with something to think about. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think celebrities should speak out about political and social issues? Or do you believe their influence sometimes overshadows the voices of ordinary people? Tell us your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoy dramatic, intense celebrity moments like this one, make sure to subscribe to the Truth Narrator, like this video, and share it with others. Because the next unbelievable story might be even bigger than this one.